they made it very clear to us that if we played any more shows before we paid them, that things would not end well for us. They will be paid, or there's going to be some serious trouble with our bodies being harmed. Basically, we'd get killed.
Welcome, everyone, to This Was The Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Before we start, did you know I have an Instagram account where every Monday and Thursday I do teasers of the upcoming show that's coming out on Friday? So if you want to go check that out, just go to Instagram and then go to This Was The Scene. And make sure you tag some friends in some posts, because the more people find out about this, the more popular it'll become and the longer I can keep doing it. So it's very helpful. It's free. Go do that, and I'll be very happy. Smoke a Fire originally formed in '98, calling themselves Jericho. Their fan base grew as they played DIY basement shows in small clubs throughout the Northeast. When living in Boston proved too expensive, the quartet moved to Richmond, Virginia to explore the punk rock scene and to work on their second album. They changed their name to Smoke a Fire when they signed to Fat Records in late 2004. Their debut album, Above the City, was co-produced by Fat Mike of NOFX and was released in March 2005. From there, they released 2 more albums before calling it a day. Thank you, Casey from Iodine Recordings, for the intro to Joe. This interview is awesome, and I'm ecstatic for you fine folks to listen to it. Side note, Joe lives in Germany, so there's a part where we start talking about where he lives, but I don't reference it, which would be confusing, so I figured I'd give you a heads up now so it just clarifies that. I got Joe on the Skype, and this is what we chat about. How he started singing without knowing how to sing, FSU fucking up the scene, playing a show at a club in some random dude's basement, how they met Tim from Avail, quitting their jobs to go on tour with Avail, getting signed to Fat, what he said to Drive Thru, touring with Against Me, the Czech Mafia story. It's fucking nuts. This is like one of the best parts of this interview. The Guamper plane crashing story, which is like a runner-up for how good the Czech Mafia story is, and a ton more. Check out their new release on Iodine Recordings, Beauty Fades, which features Smoke a Fire's debut EP, Workers Union, and many other unreleased tracks on vinyl for the first time. It's available for pre-order now through Iodine Recordings' website, with only a few color variants remaining. Available everywhere May 27th. That's all I got to say, so feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. I don't know if Casey gave you a rundown, but this whole podcast, even though pretty much it seems like you guys really caught fire. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but you got more notice in 2005 when you signed to Fat, would you say?
For sure, yeah.
Okay, but you guys had started in the 90s, and my criteria is always, like if a band started in 2006, I'm always like, but unless they grew up in the scene. So it's like this weird balance that I'll play with.
Sure.
But you growing up in the Boston scene and then living in Richmond and then being on Fat and then like touring and you guys being around for 20 years, it seems perfect. So the whole formula is really about the late 90s punk scene, and I've talked to bands that have started then or gotten the scene then, and a bunch of them have gone over that hump into the 2000s, and then it's cool to get their viewpoint on what that fucking looked like to them coming from the other scene. So let's so there's like a bunch of stuff here. Like I said, you went from Boston, and then you're in Richmond, and then did you guys eventually move to Cali when you were on Fat?
No, but there was a time when I was with somebody who lived in Los Angeles, so I was spending a lot of time on the West Coast, and Jeremy was dating somebody from Fat Records actually, so he was living in San Francisco for a while.
Oh, so was that allowed for Fat to be dating the talent?
I mean, I guess so, but I don't know if the band or the label thought it was a very good idea, but it happened.
Did it turn out being not a good idea, or?
I mean, for them it turned out pretty good for some years, but I think when it ended, I wouldn't say it helped us very much.
Interesting. Oh, cool. Let's work up to that.
I got nothing to hide.
Yeah, man. So let's start off with just like how you got involved in the scene, and we're gonna go over the lifespan of the band and just things like that. So how did you get involved in like the local punk scene in Massachusetts? Did you just start going to shows, or did you start like by yourself before you were in the band, or did you go to shows because you were in a band?
No, I mean, I grew up in the middle of nowhere, really, in Western Massachusetts, like just cow pastures and stuff. There was no music scene. I think if you wanted to go see a show, you kind of had to drive like 45 minutes to to like a whole other town, and they had some clubs there, and I think maybe the first show I saw was ever like the Boss Tones in Sensefield or something. But where I was, there was nothing at all. So I really couldn't wait to move to Boston and just go to shows and just see live bands play.
Was that like the eye-opening thing when you went to see local bands? It kind of give you like I can do this?
I don't know if it was I can do this. It was I have to do this. I was so in love with it. I mean, our guitar player Jeremy and I, we grew up together in Western Mass, and it was a bunch of hippies and stuff. And we had a friend named Pete. Pete's uncle lived in Boston, and he used to work for the Boss Tones. And I think maybe when we were like 15 years old, he was the guy, the older dude that gave us the tape, and he gave us a tape, and I think it had the Boss Tones on one side and Operation Ivy on the other side, and that was it for us. We wanted to buy guitars and find all the punk rock music we could, and so that was kind of it for us. And Jeremy and I started a really terrible band in high school. He played guitar and I played bass. We weren't good, but it was that kind of your first bad band that gets you to hopefully get into your second bad band. And so yeah, I moved to Boston in '97 for school. Was just looking to join a band as soon as possible, and I kind of luckily met the right guys pretty quick, actually.
Well, when you said you had to, when I was like, you said before you had to do it, like what did you mean by that?
I was just so in love with music. I mean, I grew up playing music, but I was playing saxophone, since I was a little kid, and I was in marching band and all that shit. I had that moment when, like a lot of people my age, I think I heard Nirvana and everything changed. I kind of didn't care about Motley Crue and Def Leppard anymore. I bought my first guitar. That's all I thought about was music. I basically just went to school to get out of my town and try and be in a city and find a band.
Well, if you got like into the original tape you got was ska, did you guys start a ska band?
No, we kind of we were trying to play, covers and whatever we could kind of play, and then tried to write some original stuff. I don't think it was really that much ska. It was just whatever we could kind of play. I think it wasn't good, but I think it was more on the punk side than the ska side.
So you got like a rougher voice, and because you started off and you were singing and playing bass, right?
When I tried out for the band that became Jericho in '97, I tried out to play bass. I was lucky. I kind of ran into these guys that had this punk band from New Hampshire called Born Ugly. They were pretty good up there. The singer Andy had moved out to California to play with a band called Screw 32. And so these guys were sort of like looking to put together a new band. I tried out to play bass, and they kind of called me and said, you can play bass, but you have to sing too, because the guy that was going to sing quit. And I was like, I can't sing. I don't know how to sing, because I didn't sing in the band in high school. I was terrible. But they said that's kind of the deal. So I was like, well, okay. So I'll give it a shot.
Isn't that kind of wild that you had that one couple second conversation or couple minutes led you to 20 years or so of doing this shit?
Absolutely.
That's so wild.
Crazy. It's crazy, but I think about what a mission I was on back then to find it. I remember walking into my first day of class in school, and this kid walked in front of me, and he had a backpack with an Avail patch on it. And I just tapped him on the shoulder, and I was like, hey, I play bass. Do you play guitar? And he just looked at me like, yeah. And I was like, let's start a band. And he just looked at me like I was crazy. And we became friends. And that was Chris from Born Ugly. And so we became friends, and the rest is history.
That's crazy. I actually just saw Avail in North Carolina a couple weekends ago.
Did you go to that? Jesus.
I had never seen them prior to that, and they
really,
yeah, it was them. Hot Water opened.
Yeah,
I think there was it was Be Well, then Hot Water, and then Avail. I had never seen that. That was one of the best shows I've ever seen in my fucking life.
They're the best live band ever. We were so fortunate they took us under their wing. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to talk about that too, because we'll get into that when you get down to Richmond and all that. So it's fascinating, but because you got to really experience all that shit up close. So how does this lead to? Because when is Smoke or Fire? When does it officially become like that band?
I think that's kind of like that. I think that happened actually when we were going to work with Iodine, because I think that's when it became an issue with this Christian rock band that, they just played churches and stuff, but they had kind of owned the rights to the name.
For Smoke or Fire or Jericho? For
Jericho, yeah. And that's the first time it kind of became a thing, because Casey's Iodine was the real deal and everything. And we kind of mentioned about this thing, and I think the first solution for us was, well, they asked us for like $10,000 or something. We didn't have any money.
What?
Yeah, it was crazy. And we
Very
were like,
Christian of them.
exactly, yeah. So, so that was no, obviously. And so our solution, I think at the time, was to be Jericho RVA because we were moving to Richmond. I think that's the first kind of solution that we had. But then when we got signed to Fat, that's when Fat was like, no, we're not even messing around with this. You guys got to change your name.
Wait, so how does that intertwine with Iodine and Fat and the name change? It's like it seems like it all was happening at the same time.
It was over the course of a few years because I think Iodine, that was 2002, I want to say that we were going to work with them. And then I think when we sort of did the Jericho RVA thing to avoid, when we pressed the Workers Union, originally the EP, I think we decided that it was safest to be Jericho RVA. And then a couple of years later, we got signed to Fat, and that's when they were like, you guys got to change your name.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay. So like what is your life because I mean obviously when you get on Fat, that's when you even said things really took off, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So prior to that, how long were you guys in Boston as Jericho, and then at what point in the career did you move to Richmond?
Jericho started in '97. I think it took a couple of years for us to, I think it took a year or two, probably 2 years for us to kind of start, getting some people out to the shows and stuff. You started TT and the Bears. That was our first like club show, which was really exciting, and then you get to the Middle East, and it took a couple of years for us to kind of get the club shows and not just be playing basements and going up to Gloucester and things like that. But then, it's like, how it is. You finally get your first opening at a shitty club, and then you play second at a shitty club, and then maybe you headline a shitty club, and then it's like you kind of move up the ladder a little bit. And then at some point, hopefully you're kind of headlining somewhere at a small club, and then you just kind of keep working your way up. And that's kind of what we did over the years.
So what are you playing at this point? Like, or what are you guys playing off of? Like, how many albums or EPs do you guys have out in this time leading up to right before you go to Richmond?
So we started in '97. We recorded our first record in 1999. It was called When the Battery Dies. Honestly, I think we were supposed to originally record at Salad Days or something like that. There was a studio there.
Yeah, was that under Iodine's time?
No, we didn't know Iodine yet then. We were really pretty new, and we had these songs. I think maybe there's 10, 11, 12 songs on that record, or they're all like a minute or two apiece. We ended up putting that record out with this really small label called Gunboat Records. They only put a few records out, I think, but no distribution, nothing like that. And so we were playing off of that, and then I'd written most of these songs that are coming out on this Iodine release, the Workers Union stuff and all the unreleased stuff. I wrote in like 2000, 2001. I wrote a lot after 9/11 actually, which is kind of why it's so weird to hear these songs so many years later, because it just makes me think back to that time. We had that, and then we had this Workers Union EP, and we were playing all those songs until we kind of in Richmond we wrote what became the first release on Fat.
Before you moved to Richmond, like what does the scene look like in Boston for you guys?
Amazing scene. I mean, amazing scene to begin with. When I first moved there, I was so amped to just see live music that I literally would just go to the Middle East upstairs probably 6 nights a week. I didn't even look at who was playing, and I would just hang out there and go to shows. And then there were so many shows in all the churches and the halls, and it was unbelievable, the music scene there. And then, for some certain reasons, we kind of watched a lot of it fall apart. There happened to be a group in town that was messing a lot of things up for people and hurting kids. And I think we kind of watched a lot of these hall shows and churches and all these other places kind of slow down and stop doing shows because they were getting sued by people because these kids were getting hurt. The FSU guys were screwing a lot of things up and breaking.
Yeah. Casey was telling me about that, and then it was there was someone who's interviewed recently, and they were talking about that. That's like a whole thing that I just literally found out about.
Oh, really? Yeah. This was kind of hard to watch because, if there was a new venue or a big show, you didn't know what was going to happen with those guys showing up, and kind of watched the scene deteriorate a lot because of it.
That's so fucking crazy.
Yeah, it was sad. It was really sad.
That's weird. Like I was in a band. We played in Massachusetts a lot, and we never saw that. We were up there between like 97 through about 2000. We would be playing up there, and I never saw that element.
Oh, the hardcore scene was huge. It was so big. And for me, like, I was more into the punk rock stuff. I mean, I loved the hardcore bands like Bane. Reach the Sky was good, and there was some really good hardcore bands. But I didn't understand the shows I went to where people were just kicking the shit out of each other, and I was like, wait, these are the guys I went to high school with that I didn't like, like the bullies, you know. And so that part was a bit strange to me.
Yeah, I forget. Yeah, Casey sent me some link to the guy who like ran the FSU, and now he went to jail, but he's a director, and he does like the Mayans or something. He was a writer, producer for that
Yeah,
show or something crazy like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
fucking gnarly. So like, what was any of this a cause of you guys to move to Richmond?
That wasn't, no. The main cause for us to move was, honestly, we just really couldn't afford to do it in Boston. It's a really expensive city. You know, after we were all out of school, we were living up in Allston, which is like the student ghetto. And I think we had at one point like 6 or 7 of us were living in a 3-bedroom apartment, and we were still paying a ridiculous amount of money and working all these jobs and stuff. We kind of finally saved up to do our first tour. We were going from like Boston down to Gainesville and back up. And I think on the third day, the engine seized in our van, like in Western Pennsylvania, and we were just screwed. We were totally screwed. We had no money. It was a Friday at like 6 o'clock, and Monday was a holiday, and we were just absolutely screwed. And luckily, this tow truck driver was driving by the van, and he said, "My son plays in a band," and he picked us up and took us to his house, and then he went and looked at the van, and the van was toast. And his son actually drove us back like 10 hours to Boston, which was amazing. Yeah, yeah. He packed us into his minivan with all of our stuff and drove us 10 hours, dropped us off, and drove home. It was crazy.
What did you ever find out what band he was in?
No, he wasn't like in like a real band. He was just like, he played harmonica with some kids or something. I don't know, like but this the tow truck driver, like, he took us to his house, and he kind of gave us some food, and he was like, "My only request is that you guys play some music with me because I love music." And we were like, "Yeah, totally. What's up?" And so he's like, "All right, come with me." So we went downstairs into his basement, and he had a stage that was built with lights and a PA and like a full music setup with like amps and drums and everything. And we were like, "Do you have shows down here?" And he's like, No, that's just for me. I just like to pretend that like I kind of have a club."
What the fuck?
Yeah, so he was stoked. He was like, "You guys will play with me?" And we're like, "Yeah." So we just jammed with him for a little while, and he was like, "All right, I'm gonna go take a look at your van."
That's the weirdest fucking story.
Yeah,
that's so random.
It's so random, and he was so happy about it. Like that he got to play on his little stage.
I feel like this is where when Casey said you have so many stories, like you're that guy that just happens to just stumble upon shit. Like
it's true. I know. Before the pandemic, people told me there were so many people that told me you need to write a book that I actually started writing a book. But then I had a kid, so I was like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna hold off on this for a little bit.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, that's so time consuming, and you're not like guaranteed if it's gonna do anything. But that's crazy. So okay, so you guys get back to Boston, you realize you're broke as shit, and living with 7 guys in a three bedroom apartment. This sounds gross.
Yeah, and the thing is, we had met the guys from Avail. There was this really great festival back in the day called Crazy Fest in Louisville.
Yep. Yeah.
And we just went down there with I think it's actually the EP that we ended up, Casey was going to put out. And we had those songs, and we just burnt, like 100 CDs, and we just handed them out there. We're sitting in our hotel room in Louisville, getting ready to go to the first day. We're in there drinking, PBR, and one of the guys in the room looks out and just goes, "That's Tim Barry from Avail." And we all look out the window, and Tim's just standing there drinking a beer outside of our hotel room. And we're like the biggest Avail fans. Like everybody in the room had an Avail tattoo.
Oh wow.
And so he kind of looks and sees all these dudes looking out the window, and he just opens the door and he walks in, and he's like, "What's up, y'all?" And he's like, "Oh, you got PBR in a bottle? What the fuck?" And we're like, "Yeah, man, they're in the bathroom." And we just, dumped them all in the tub and filled it with ice. And he's like, "Can I grab one?" We're like, "Yeah, man." And he came in and just hung out with us. Like, we were just like, this is crazy. Wow. And so he was like, "All right, I want to go see Boy Sets Fire. You guys coming?" And we're like, "Yeah, let's go." And I gave him a CD. And I said, "I know you get these all the time, but this is our band. And he kind of took it and he goes, yeah, I get these all the time. And I can tell you, I'm probably not going to listen to it. And I said, I totally get it, man. It's all good. So it's funny. So we all go to the show and he's like, hey, I'm going to go say hi to some friends backstage, but we should all hang out tonight and go play some pool or something. And we're like, yeah, sure, Tim. And he leaves and we're like, what, sweetheart, this is the nicest guy in the world. But we're thinking there's no way that we're going to go play pool with him tonight. He's just being nice. So after the show that night, we're walking to the parking lot and we hear, hey, y'all, what's up? And then here comes Tim running at us. He's like, I thought we were going to hang out tonight. And we're like, this is crazy. So we hung out. And then the next day we got to the festival, day 2. And all these people kept coming up to me and saying, Tim Barry's looking for you. Tim Barry's looking for you. And sure enough, Tim was like, dude, I listened to that last night. He's like, I love it. You guys are great, And we talked for a long time about everything. And then he was saying, y'all should move to Richmond because it's way cheaper. There's a great music scene. And then, Strike Anywhere had stayed with us when they played in town. We played a show with them. And, Thomas, Punk Rock Jesus, was like, we're having tea in the morning. He's the sweetest guy ever. And he's like, do you mind if he sees like all these people strewn about the apartment and like don't even have bedrooms? And he's like, do you mind if I ask you how much you're paying here for rent? And I told him, and he just was like, oh, that's not good.
What were you guys paying? I have to know what you guys are paying in rent.
I think this is 2002. I think we're each paying $500 a month. And we lived in like just the worst apartment.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Okay. My apartment was a porch that someone very, very poorly put walls on, and I couldn't even be in there when it rained. So yeah. So he was like, same thing. You guys should move to Richmond. It's cheap. There's a great music scene. And so, yeah, when we got back from this tour that fell apart, I kind of said to the guys, like, listen, we can't do it this way. It's not going to work. If we want to do this, we need to do it. And I think Richmond is the way to do it. And yeah, everyone except one guy was in.
How quickly did you guys move down after that conversation?
Oh, I have to think about it, man. I can't remember. Maybe a couple months. I think pretty soon after that, me and 2 of the guys, we just got in a van and drove down to Richmond and looked for an apartment for all of us. And we ended up finding this house on Main Street. It was huge, and that was it. And I think I paid $100 a month, had my own bedroom.
Wow. So it's funny you said I literally, the last time I was in Richmond was about a little over 20 years ago, and we had played at Twisters, and we stayed with James from River City High.
Sure.
My little sister lives in D.C. and I'm in Raleigh, so we met halfway in Richmond 2 weekends ago. So I just went back. So I was on Lombardy Street. Do you know that street?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's where we lived. We lived on Lombardy Street.
Get the fuck. So I was about about 2 blocks from Main Street on Lombardy.
Yep, that's where we lived.
Get the fuck out of here. That's so crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. So was it like before the circle with like that statue got taken down during the BLM movement?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we got down there, I think 2003, I think we were down there.
I remember when we played there, the town seemed like it was pretty beat up at the time.
Sure, yes. It was a rough town. It was third in the country for murder at the time, and
holy shit.
It was rough. Yeah, it was a rough town.
So did you guys play at Twisters like a ton?
Yes. Yeah. I don't think it was still called Twisters by the time we played there, though. I think that they changed. They went through a lot of name changes over the years, and I think it had been changed to something else.
It was because I went to some vinyl store. It was like about 10 blocks north from Lombardy on Main. It was like parallel, it was parallel to where we were. And some record store there, vinyl store, and some girl was like, yeah, it went from Twisters to this, and now it's just completely closed. I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, I think it was called Nancy Ray Gun after that.
Something like that. So you guys get down there. Did it work out? I mean, obviously you guys get on Fat, so it seems anyone who's in a band at that time and Fat Records in general, like that's a pinnacle label to get on if you're in the scene. So were things, when you get there in Richmond, were things like kind of moving in the direction you wanted a little faster?
Yeah, I think it just allowed us to do it, and not, we all got our jobs, and when I got there, I didn't have a bank account. I started working at this like 24-hour diner, and I was working midnight to 8 o'clock in the morning. But I was making my rent in one night, and just putting cash in a jar. And we had a practice space in the house where we wrote that record for Fat, and we had shows in our living room. I mean, I think it was like a week after we moved there, this girl knocked on our door, and she was like, "Hey, can we have a show here this weekend or something next weekend?" And we were like, "Yeah, who?" And they were like, Planes Mistaken for Stars, and we were like, that was one of our favorite bands ever,
Wow.
and we were like, yeah, absolutely. So all of a sudden, we have 200 kids in our living room, and they call us Boston House, and you know, we're playing basement shows, and we're starting to get into clubs, and yeah, it kind of moved pretty quickly after that.
So like when you're writing at this time, because there's this balance of like you said earlier, like you had to get like you had to get out and like you had to be part of the scene and you had to play music. So like how much of that passion of doing that is baked into the songwriting?
A lot of it, I think, a lot of the songs were about just wanting to do it.
What was it? Just playing shows and shit or touring?
Yeah, I think the struggle of it, of how bad you wanted to do it, you know, but not quite being able to, was a lot of stuff that I wrote about. I think that was what I wrote about from the beginning. I only think the reason we sort of got a little more political with the writing was after 9/11. That's when I think we were all a lot more political. We were all thinking differently about a lot of stuff. So I think that had a lot to do with it as well.
That's yeah, actually it's got to be crazy for you being so close to all the action right now.
Yeah, it's very strange.
Just thinking of 9/11 and that was in your backyard and now it's really just it's just like almost as close right where you are.
Yeah, it's really crazy. It's yeah, it's wild. My son's mom came and picked him up on Sunday, and we were sitting on the sidewalk talking about what we do with him and what we do if World War III breaks out. And I'm
Jeez.
sitting there like, I can't believe we're having this discussion right now.
Yeah. Fuck, dude, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, let's dive back into Richmond so it'll be
Yeah,
happier
sure.
times. So you guys are like playing. You're now at this point. Are you on Iodine?
Well, I mean, that's the whole thing. That's when the record was supposed to come out, and then it kind of didn't. And then, you know, all I really knew is that Casey was gone. Our drummer at the time was more of the contact for Iodine because they were Casey and him were pretty good friends, and it kind of just didn't really happen. It was like, oh well, Iodine's done, and no one really knows where Casey is. So that was that was tough because we were really excited about that release, which years later, I'm kind of happy with the way it turned it out, to be honest.
So was that going to be above the city?
No, that was the Workers Union EP.
Okay. And this is all with Jericho RVA. So you're playing with
Yeah,
that name, student name. It's that band name
right.
at the time. You guys are the Boston House. You're starting to grow, get a following in Richmond. Are you guys like going on the road and touring during all this?
As much as we could, we were getting out there, but we really kind of, I think, at the time, were I think we were trying to establish ourselves in Richmond because the scene there was so impressive that I think for us the first thing was like, let's let's kind of take what we did in Boston and let's do that here, but become the band that we want to be. And so I think for us, the focus was like writing the next record and getting some support finally. So, you know, we were really just like in the music scene in Richmond. And I think just trying to be better as a band and constantly working on Above the City, which is what ended up getting us on Fat. So that, I think that was our priority.
So you guys are like, but and this is also the time when so 9/11 happens, the music scene starts to really like. I was saying in one episode, a couple episodes, it was like Pandora's box opened, and it was just these genres just shit out of it, and just all these directions, and it became a fucking fashion show, and
Yes.
it wasn't the same, and you're kind of having to deal with these bullshit bands coming out because they see opportunity and they're utilizing that to their advantage, and you're like, we're trying to write real fucking music here, and you fucking assholes are,
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
showing up with hairspray and shit like that.
Oh God, I remember when it happened. I remember just being at it. I know I sound like such an asshole now, but I remember just being at these shows, and all of a sudden, it was like I don't know, like the Beatles were playing or something, and there was a lot of finger pointing and flicking pics, and it was very cute all of a sudden. And I kind of looked around like, what the fuck is happening? This is weird. And then yeah, and then the hairspray and makeup and stuff. It was a strange time. I know I didn't like it very much.
Well, that's like the premise of tongue in cheek. The premise of this podcast is kind of like our scene was better than yours. Obviously, as an adult, there's bands I like that scene, but I remember
Yeah.
at the time just being so annoyed. Like, what is this shit?
Yeah.
So for you though, I mean, you guys are catching it, like catching a wave in 2005, which is like, fucking 4 years into that whole shift. And then you guys are still, then you stay around for a little bit longer. I mean, that's just like, did I don't know, was it a bit of a battle between you getting to Richmond and then getting to be on Fat? Like just would all that shit happening around you?
I think, you know, I think I sort of was always feeling like we were at the wrong place at the wrong time with things. And that was, yeah, I think when I saw that happening around me, I felt like, oh, we're just kind of getting good at this. And there's this big shift in the music scene, which I wasn't really crazy about. And so I think, I don't know, maybe I felt like maybe we were going to get left behind from that. But then we were very fortunate because Jim from Avail heard the Above the City record and he gave it to a friend at Fat. And Fat Mike called me out of nowhere. And well, actually, you know, before that even happened, now I have to correct myself. What really happened was we were living at the Boston House in Richmond and we got a phone call from Avail. And they had been on this U.S. tour, and I think for Front Porch Stories, their record. And they were on tour with The Casualties and The Curse, which was Dave Haas's old band. The Curse broke up. And so Tim said to us, kind of like half jokingly, like, hey, do you guys want to meet us in Raleigh, North Carolina in 2 days and do a couple weeks on tour with us? And we just said, absolutely. And we all quit our jobs and got in the van and drove there. And they were just like, you guys are insane. What's wrong with you? And so that was our first real tour. It was like all of a sudden we're playing these huge shows every single night, sold out. And I'm going to all these cities I've never been to. And I think Avail was pretty impressed with us just kind of jumping into that on no notice and never playing venues that size and stuff. So I think after that, he was really looking out for us, and he ended up sending the Above the City record to Fat, and Fat loved it. And so that was kind of the rest is history.
I mean, he pretty much, I mean, I think by doing that, it showed that you guys were willing to work, you know, like it
Yeah.
seems like two things that happened. Well, three things. One, he randomly hangs out with you, which is even more odd to kind of add to your story of how weird shit happens for you. Because I mean, I haven't even touched the surface, it sounds like, of all the other stories you probably have. So you randomly meet him, you guys hang out, you give him the CD, he actually fucking listens to it, knowing that he wasn't probably going to. He likes it, tells you guys you should move to Richmond after like Strike Anywhere is telling you this too. You finally go there. So he's like, I like their band. They actually moved to Richmond, and then they showed up at fucking Raleigh for this tour. I mean, just that alone right there is like the perfect storm for him to be like, all right, I can trust that me passing this along to Fat Mike, like they're gonna show up.
Yeah. And he knows. I mean, he said to us years later, he said, I think we paid you guys $50 a night, and I think you were worth about 10 on that tour. And it's true. I mean, we learned a lot on that tour. We learned a lot about, you know, being on tour, about there's a documentary about Avail that still has not come out yet, but there's a trailer for it. And in the trailer, there's a bunch of bands being asked about Avail. And I remember there's this one time we were in Europe on our first European tour. And I think, our bass player was talking to the guys from Boy Sets Fire, and he said, you know, Avail taught us how to be a band. And Boy Sets Fire was like, they taught us how to be a band too. And you heard Strike Anywhere stand up and go, they taught us how to be a band too. And like all the bands that had ever played with them were like, that band taught us how to be a band. You know?
Yeah, I actually, it's funny you said that because I just launched the interview with Rob from Ann Beretta, and he said the same thing. He goes,
Oh yeah.
they showed us exactly how to be and how to just basically not be dicks, really.
Yeah. Yeah. To be grateful and to play your ass off, you know, like one of the biggest lessons I remember, we were on this huge tour and they're just huge shows. But then I think we had a show maybe in like Milwaukee or something. And, you know, there was maybe like 50 kids there. It was not a big show for them at all. And I've never seen them play harder, you know? And that's when I was like, these guys know what's up, because they were like, there's 50 kids here. Let's give them the best show they've ever seen.
Did you ever have a conversation with him when you're on tour and just say like, where do you get this, not energy from, or like, where do you get this vision from for what you guys are doing?
Yeah, I think it's the love of music. And I think it's just, you know, it's something that they have to do, you know, more than want to do. You know, I understand that feeling of just having like, it's something in you have to do it because it's the greatest feeling in the world. And so you're just grateful to be able to do it.
Well, when they broke up, I mean, that was early 2000, right? It was right after Over the James?
Um, no, because they did One Wrench. And I think after that, after that record. So I think it was more closer to 2010.
Oh wow, I didn't realize
I
they stayed
think.
around that. I thought they broke up way earlier. I think sometimes I get their timeline mixed up with Lifetime, which obviously is so different now because
Oh yeah.
because Lifetime was, they were gone way before that. But it seemed like there was bands that they were. I guess my point was that you guys are surrounding yourself with this motivation and these heroes of yours in Richmond to try to grow. And at some point, I was trying to put the pieces together, like you're starting to see them fall apart or like them stop, where you're kind of going and be like, "Hey, where'd everybody go?"
Yeah, but that was happening to a lot of bands at that point. So I think it was, we knew how difficult it was to be a band, especially, I listened to Casey's podcast and it made sense what he was talking about with, the internet coming along and nobody buying records anymore. And we knew how difficult it was to be a band. And so I never faulted anybody for getting away from it, to be honest.
I mean, this got to be a little bit. I remember from an outside perspective, like I had stopped playing and I left New Jersey. Was like, I'm doing the whole. I got to figure out my life, and I started really focusing on it in 2004. And as I'm doing this, I'm back in Jersey. I'm going to school. I know what I'm gonna do, but I'm going to shows. And every time I walk through the door, if it was a local show or a club show, I just got this feeling like, where's this going? Like what direction is this shit going? And I just thought of bands playing at that time, thinking like, where are we taking this? Because it seemed the path was brand new, quote unquote, for the fun of the band, but like it was a whole brand new path, and you had to be like the Taking Back Sunday style or the screamo shit or whatever that stuff was, and you had to fit in that to go and say, well, now we have this new direction that we feel like, okay, we can make this happen, but you guys are in a lane that's not in that same going in that same direction.
Well, I think that's why we're so fortunate to be on Fat, because the thing is, Fat comes with this just like built-in audience. If you're on Fat, all of a sudden it's like you're in this kind of club. And so once that happened, yeah, it took away all of that stress and that pressure of like, where the fuck do we fit into this? Because we kind of like, for once, we kind of had a home.
Well, and this is the era too where Fat's like it's got a new coat of paint on, because Lawrence Arms came out before that with Greatest Story Retold and their record prior to that. So this whole, like, I always call this like grittier beer punk kind of sound starts to happen with
Yeah,
that.
it was like Saturday Night Live. It was like the new cast was coming in because they were signing like Against Me and the Lawrence Arms, and sort of these younger bands were coming in, and we were part of that. Yeah, it totally was.
I can see that. Then that for you guys, I could see where that would be like, okay, cool. Like, yes, we do have that. There is a light that we're going towards right now.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So when you guys get on Fat, it was just the same. It was the handshake, the one record deal, and then you decide if you want to do another one later on.
Yeah, that's the way they always did it. I mean, I told you I worked at this 24-hour diner. I got home at like 8:30 in the morning one morning, and my phone rang, and it was like, "Hey, this is Fat Mike. Is this Joe?" And I was like, "What?" Like, I was like,
Wow.
"Hello?" And he's like, "Yeah, I want to sign your band." And I was like, "Okay." And he's like, "Are you guys cool?" And I was like, "Yeah, we're pretty cool." And he's like, "Okay." Because he told me they had never signed a band that he had never met before. And he was very worried about that. But he said, he'd heard really great things and that we could hang. And so, yeah, it was the first time they signed a band they hadn't met. But that was pretty much it. He was like, "All right, cool. I'll call you later. Bye." And hung up. And I just was like, "What the fuck?" And I called Jeremy, and I was like, "Hey, Fat Mike just called me and they want to sign us." And he was like, "Shut up." And he hung up on me. And I called him back. I was like, "Dude, call in sick to work. We're going to the bar." And so we kind of all just went to the bar and got drunk, and we're like, "Holy shit."
So like, I always think that there's these moments in your life, these milestones happen that you really want to have happen, and then they finally happen. You're just like, I can't believe this is fucking happening right now. I mean, I guess you kind of explained it, but for just the feeling of that, what was going on in your mind when after that phone call?
I thought back to being like 15 years old and hearing those first tapes and those first bands and just all of the years of shit. Because I have to tell you, there was a time when I was 19 years old where a very large label approached me and offered us a 7 record deal when they were signing up all these bands to 7 record deals and selling to MCA Records.
Oh, drive through.
Yes.
Okay.
They approached us when I was like 19 years old, and we ended up going out to California. We drove out there just because we wanted to drive across the country and go to California. So we drove from Boston to Los Angeles. We played 3 shows, and they sat me down and said, "Here's the deal. We're going to sign you to 7 records. We'll put out 1 or 2, whatever. You know, we're going to sell the MCA. You're going to have a house and a pool and music videos and all this shit." And I was like, "No, no thanks." And he just looked at me and was like, "Excuse me?" And I said, "Yeah, not interested. Thank you, though." And he was like, "Who the fuck do you think you are?" And I said, "Listen, man, I know that we suck. You know," I said, "We want to go out there and we want to eat shit like the bands that we love that went out and ate shit, and figure out who we are and like be good, be a good band, you know, not just sign a bunch, not just get put in a studio with some producer and get dressed up the way you want us to and all this shit." And we left, and that was it. But you know, there was a couple of years in between there where I thought to my, like, you know, when we were standing on the highway with our van on fire and thinking, did we make the right decision? Did I fuck up? You know? So I think when that happened with Fat, I thought to myself, I'm so glad that I listened to myself and took the difficult way.
That's awesome, dude. I mean, and also if you look at the track records of the bands on Drive Through, I don't think anyone, I mean, I saw Newfound Glory a couple months ago and it was great. But that path that they sold people, I don't think anyone really was able to do what they were saying.
I don't think anyone really did well. And I remember one of the first times I was hanging out with Fat Mike when we went out to San Francisco. You know, all those bands were calling him and being like, "Hey, we just got dropped. Will you sign us?" And he was like, "No." And I was like, "Oh God, thank God we didn't do that." You know?
That's fucking crazy, man. So when he called you back, or was it someone else from the office that called you back and said, "By the way, you gotta drop the name and change it"?
I think Mark was the head of the office at Fat then. He was amazing, such a funny guy. He was great. So I think Mark called me back, and he was kind of my point guy there for a while. And he was kind of like, "All right, let's get this rolling. Let's talk about the record. Mike wants to get you guys in Motor Studios out here and finish. He wants to try a few things on the record and maybe tweak a few things. He wants to meet you guys, obviously. So let's do that." And then he's like, "Let's talk about the name. What's the deal?" And so we kind of told him what the story was, and he was like, "All right, let me talk to them." And then he kind of called back and said, I think it was a debate for a while, because when they finally told us we had to come up with a new name, I'm pretty sure we only had like 3 days to do it because the record was going to press. And we were on tour at the time. And I remember it was like, we're just throwing names around and calling the label and being like, "What about this? What about this?" And they'd be like, Google search, like, "No, there's a DJ named that in Sweden. Sorry." Like, and so, yeah, finally, we were playing an old drinking game from when we used to play in Boston called Up and Down the River. And the first thing is smoke or fire. Is your card can be black or red. And somebody said smoke or fire. And I just went, "Is that a band name?" And they were like, "I don't know." And I called Fat and I was like, "Smoke or fire?" And they were like, "Cool, that's it."
Did you feel like when you found that name, it gave you another like boost?
You know, I'll be honest with you. I never liked the name Jericho because there was, it actually was a reference. The guitar player came up with that name, and he was a painting major, and he was referred to Jericho, the artist. But we would get a lot of questions all the time if we were a Christian rock band, and I couldn't stand that. I hated that people thought that. So I was actually pretty happy to change the name, and also kind of felt like a fresh start, to be honest.
I was thinking that when you said it was Jericho, I was wondering if there was some kind of like religious connection. So I mean, that's just baked into the name, it seems like.
Yeah, it always bothered me. Always bothered me. So yeah, I was kind of happy actually that we got to change it.
Well, I kind of feel like the Smoke or Fire thing. It's like Gaslight Anthem. They were called This Charming Man before they became Gaslight Anthem, and then
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, they toured on that for a while, and I think they changed the name because the label. I don't really know the whole story, but I felt that Gaslight Anthem it made it big. It almost like when a company rebrands itself or redoes its logos, they do that because they know psychologically it gives it a like it makes it bigger, bolder, and it matches. They do it to match the brand basically.
For sure.
And not like you were doing it like that, but there is something psychological to it when you have a new name. Because one, when you're in a band and you hate your band name, that is the worst.
For
Because
sure.
when someone
For
asks
sure.
you and you're like, it's this, they're like, oh, like, I know. but I want to live
Yeah.
off of it and be successful, but I hate the
Yeah.
fucking name. They're like, it's not really gonna work.
Oh, there's definitely some bands where I think they must have not thought they were going to go anywhere, and then all of a sudden they're huge, and they're like, "Oh fuck, well, we should have spent a little more time on this than picking the first name," because then they're stuck with it.
I mean, there's nothing more. I saw Jimmy at World last night, and I love that name, but I mean, I'm watching them play, and just behind them in lights is Jimmy Eat World, just giant letters, and I'm thinking that's the name they got stuck with. You know, it worked out, but I mean, it's just behind them, like, yep, that's our fucking name, and
Yeah,
luckily it worked.
but it's funny how you think about that because by the time I ever heard Jimmy Eat World, they were huge, so I never thought about the name twice. It is a stupid name. It's something about like if a band is that good, you don't. It's like you almost even second guess the name. You're just like, oh, it's Jimmy Eat World. They're great. But like if they sucked, it'd be like, what's up with your stupid band name? Yeah.
and your and your shit sound.
Do they sound like shit last night?
No, they kicked ass. I'm talking about like those other band names
Oh, okay.
where they're all no,
Oh, yeah,
yeah. The
yeah,
moment
yeah.
I got into GB World with Static Prevails, and even the moment I got that, I was like, that's the weirdest name, but for some reason it makes sense, so I'm just gonna love it. I've never hated that name, but then you hear the stories about how they got it, and you're kind of like, oh, that's funny. It was like just a stupid joke, and now it's a billboard behind them when they
Yeah.
play to a packed fucking room. So like you guys get on Fat, and then so what happens then? You guys start just going on the road and just fucking road dogging it?
Absolutely. We just hit the road nonstop. I mean, Mike is smart. The first thing he usually does when he signs a band is he takes them out with NoFX just to get the name out there. I think bands realize pretty quick that's not the funnest tour that they thought it was going to be.
Wait, why?
uh, NoFX's crowd is there for NoFX. That's it. They're a whole different thing. I mean, there's lots of people that love NoFX, but like opening for them, it's not like, holy shit, we're opening for NoFX. You realize pretty quick that this isn't going to be the most fun show you've ever played. There's a lot of people just standing there like who absolutely don't give a fuck about you playing and would rather you just stop. So it's absolutely fun to tour with those guys and to play these big shows. So, but you're not gonna make a ton of fans, I don't think, on those tours. A lot of bands find out.
Are you guys partiers at all, or were you?
We definitely had a reputation for drinking a ton. Yeah, yeah, we were big drinkers.
I can imagine that tour being awesome then, if that was the case, just from that aspect of it.
Yeah, it was insane. Yeah, the first show of that tour was at the casino, the Hard Rock Casino in Las Vegas, in the big room.
Holy shit.
So we're walking into this place, loading in, and the place reeks of weed. And we're like, what the fuck is going on here? And they're like, oh, yeah, Wu-Tang Clan played here last night. And like the first song, they just said, everybody pull out your weed and smoke it. They can't arrest us all. And everyone did. So we walked in and the place just reeked of weed. And yeah, that was a fun tour for sure with those guys.
Did you guys pick anything up from that? Like, did you like you said with a veil, you learn lessons. You always learn those lessons. Like, what did you learn from that tour?
Maybe just like, I think stage banter is something I've never been good at and never taken a lot of interest in. And I kind of realized that's something I should probably get a little better at because I don't like to plan things out. We've been on tour with bands where they say the same thing between every song, every night, and I've never wanted to do that. So, but then I realized if I'm not going to do anything like that, maybe think a little bit more about your transitions in between songs and things because the band does need a break after 4 songs and somebody maybe should say something. So those guys were really, really good at that. I think that's one thing I picked up live from them was maybe be a little better with that stuff.
So, like, I mean, because when I'm reading Wikipedia, basically, or I'm reading Fat Records website, and they do a write-up on you guys, I'm just gonna jump forward for a second to jump backwards to fill up the gaps there. But was it 2008 when you guys broke up the first time, or like, well, you broke up and before taking a couple years off and then getting back together, like being like, all right, let's just keep doing this.
Yeah, I think that was 2008. Yeah, that's when we broke up because of this incident in Europe. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get back. Let's like move up to that because 2005 is when you get signed to Fat. So that's a 3-year window there of going. Basically, I mean, a band's life is record something, go on the road, go on the road, go on the road, record more shit, go on the road. I mean, it's really just rinse and repeat with
That's all we did. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then like depending on what band you are, if you get popular, then you plug in, all right, now you're doing interviews and you're on TV and things like that. But it doesn't sound like that's the path that you guys were on.
Um, there was a bit of that. I mean, we did the 50 state tour with Against Me. I think that was 2005, and that was really big.
Oh my God.
It was like 87 shows, 3.5 months, and we 4 bands entered and 2 bands finished. Us and Against Me. The other 2 bands quit and broke up.
Is that talked about in the book Tranny, that tour?
I don't know. I haven't read the book yet.
It's fantastic. You got to get the audio version. It's so good. But like when speaking, Laura speaking from Tom's voice at the time, so when Tom was Tom,
Yeah.
She's saying he was just behind the scenes. It sounded like he was saying he was an asshole, kind of. I mean, it's weird how you perceive it, but what was that like? Like, what was the relationship like with the band, with you guys and them?
I thought, because we had been doing a lot of shows with Against Me before that tour, and those guys were an absolute well-oiled machine as a band, live and everything. But they were getting big very fast, and we were kind of watching this happen, them sort of explode right before our eyes, and we knew that they deserved it. I mean, they were just incredible. So to be there with them during that time was really, really. But I think along with the pressure of getting bigger and everything, I think that's hard on any band for sure. The 50 state tour, I thought they were still really, really like tight as far as the band and everything, with some hiccups here and there. But I mean, nothing I thought that any other band, wouldn't go through.
Yeah, that's a long goddamn tour.
Yeah, and then we went to Canada with them right after that. I think that year we did 10 months straight
Oh my God.
without stopping. Yeah.
How are you guys able to do that? Just because you just get paid at a show, money goes in to, from your per diem to the van to gas to food to the next place, or were you also getting income coming in from like the record selling on Fat?
No, we didn't really have a lot of money coming in. We had a really good booking agent who was doing a lot of the Fat bands, and that just made it a lot easier, because for the first time in our life, we weren't scrounging for shows. Do you remember Book Your Own Fucking Life, that magazine?
Yeah, everybody talks about it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we used to do that shit. And like, for the first time in our life, we have this amazing booking agent who's getting us on these amazing tours. We're traveling around the world. We go to Europe.
Who was the booking agent?
Margie Alvin. She did Avail, and she did all the big bands out of Salt Lake City. And then we're going to Europe for the first time, or we're doing Deconstruction Tour, which is like the European version of the Warped Tour. And I mean, we were so happy to be there. We weren't making any money, but we were doing really good tours, and we weren't going to say no to anything. That was sort of always our motto from the very beginning: is we don't say no to shows. We were just happy to be doing it. Honestly, we were just happy.
And you guys are only touring on Above the City at this point, or was this sinking ship out?
At this point, we were doing just touring on Above the City. And then I think after maybe 2 years, it was probably 2000, I have to look, 2007 or something. It was like the label's like, all right, it's time to go make a record. And we hadn't gone home since we got signed. It's funny because that second record, I hear from a lot of people who are in bands, they really love the second record. And I think it's because it's all about being on tour and music and that kind of thing. So I think people in bands relate to that second record a lot better than people who were just kind of fans of the band,
That's a good point. I mean, that almost kind of works in your detriment if you're trying to connect with an audience through lyrics and all you're talking about is being a road dog, and they're just like,
yeah,
it sounds cool, but it's not really my jam.
Yeah. And I didn't think about it so much at the time, but I look back now and I realized, I write what I know. And at the time I had not gone home in 2 years. And so, yeah, the second record on Fat is very much about not going home and being on the road.
You're saying when you're touring with Against Me, the 50 states, Canada, you're on the road for 10 months. You're not really, it sounds like you said you weren't really selling a lot of records, or the first record.
I think the record was doing pretty well, and we had some videos out that were getting played on TV, but I wouldn't say like, we were skyrocketing to fame or anything like that. We're doing all right. We definitely, the thing is, we kind of got signed to Fat at the end of the party. Like if you were on Fat before we got signed, you're getting some serious royalty checks. And it's kind of the same thing that happened with Casey, where people stopped buying records And we kind of hit the tail end. I think when we first got signed, they would fly us out to Vegas for something, or for punk rock bowling, or like, I think they brought us out for Rock Against Bush in Minneapolis or something. And they put down like the fat card at the bar tab and said, do your worst. Let's see what you can do. And we did our worst. And they said, well, nice try, but nobody beats Dillinger 4. And, but that was the very kind of end of those days. And then, the staff cut down quite a lot. And yeah, I mean, we kind of saw a bit of it, but that was no longer a thing with us where Fat was selling tons of records anymore.
Yeah, that's right, because this is the whole download era starts.
Exactly, yeah.
So actually, I just pulled up Rock Against Bush. You guys are not on volume 1 or 2, are you?
No, we weren't on it. They just flew us out there to hang out and drink.
Oh, that's wild. Yeah, because I remember buying the first one. I liked that first one. That's probably the last Get Up Kids song, the newer one that I actually liked, because that Lion the Lamb song.
Oh, I love the Get Up Kids. They were great.
Yeah, 4 Minute Miles, the last good record for me. Yeah.
But that record is, to me, that's one of my favorite records, 4 Minute Mile.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Love that record.
Yeah, everything after that, I couldn't dig it at all.
It went downhill for me too, yeah.
Yeah. It's like someone asked me one time, like, would you ever have like Matt Pryor? And I was like, no, I've talked so much shit about his band. Like, not like I hate him. I hate it as something to write home about. Like I wasn't ready for a fucking keyboard, and
yeah.
They didn't prep me for that. And
the keyboard broke my heart. I remember the keyboard breaking my heart.
Yeah, I was like,
that's what was happening at the time. It's like, get your keyboards out of here. Come on.
Keyboards they water down music. If it's a harder sound, which really not a hard sound, but there was a rough guitar sound with them, and you add keyboard, and it just adds this like circus element to it. I'm like, what is this shit?
Well, also, I think like, I grew up in the 80s, and as soon as I heard the keyboards, I was like, I know what's happening here. This is like second new wave shit, like what's happening? Get the keyboards out of here.
Yeah. I mean, I love James DeWeese and Coalesce, and like he kicked ass on drums and all that, but I was like, anyway, I mean, it's like, sorry, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say we can vent. It's okay.
Yeah, it's my podcast. I'll do what the fuck I want. So, I mean, I love getting the perspective of, especially that time, because you're right. The previous Fat bands, they were the Strung Outs and the
Lagwagon, Propaganda.
Yeah, fucking Jesus Christ.
Good Riddance. And
no, who's the one? Oh my God, Tony Sly. Jesus Christ.
Sure. Yeah.
No, the fucking band. Oh my God, I have to edit this.
No Use for a Name you're talking about.
No Use for a Name. Thank you. Oh my God. Yeah, like that whole catalog. They were. It's a big term to throw out there, but in the late 90s, they were like royalty.
Absolutely.
They were on this pedestal with so many people, and they would just sell so many records, you'd think. And so they're getting checks, like you said, from that time. And then you're getting on the label when it's revamping itself, which really worked out for them in the long run, because I think by doing that, they have all these bands out now that are really like Teenage Bottle Rocket and Get Dead and all these bands that are out. But Bad Cop, I think is like another one. So but you guys are like right there. Downloading's become a thing. It's already like heavily into it by the time 2005 comes around. So you're screwed in that sense, and from making money from CDs and shit like that. So you're struggling with all this stuff, but then you're just like road dogging it. Like, you're just on the road the whole time saying like, yeah, we'll figure this out. At what point did you stop? Did it present itself to you like, oh, we're not going to figure this out?
I mean, you pretty much had to be selling merch to survive, so you had to be on tour. And what happened to us when it all totally shit the bed was we were offered a European tour. And I think that was probably 2008 from a band. They said, this is going to be booked by the agency group, which is not who we would usually work with. Fat bands work with Destiny Booking. So the agency group, they do like Bruce Springsteen and stuff. This is a very huge, huge booking company. And they said, this is going to be the company that's booking the tour, and it's going to be this long, and this is what you guys are going to make per night. And we were like, that sounds great. And so we hired our back line and our driver, all our gear and everything kind of based on what our guarantee was per night, and trusted that, this one of the biggest booking companies in the world is going to be fine. And then we left. We were on the road. We did US, and then we did Canada, and then we went to Japan. And then from Japan, we went to Australia. With Japan and Australia, there wasn't a lot of communication back. There wasn't like a whole lot of internet. And when I did check in, I was told everything was fine. We got to Europe and there was no tour. Yeah, there was a few shows here and there. There was no guarantee for money. We were sort of just fucked. And so we kind of bombed around and tried to salvage it ruined us. So at the end of 2 weeks, we owed the company, the backline company from Czech Republic, we owed them like a little over 10,000 euros, and we had nothing. And this particular company was run by basically the Czech mafia, which we didn't know. And they sort of understood, like, we know that this isn't your fault, but these weren't the type of people that you don't pay, put it that way.
Oh my God.
And yeah, so they made it very clear to us that if we played any more shows before we paid them, that things would not end well for us. So that was sort of it for us.
I think Casey did mention that when he was like, yeah, this wild story where there's like the mob is after them. How did they approach you and tell you this? Was this on like in person? Was this like a phone call? Like how does someone relay this message?
It was in person. When the tour ended, it was told to me that they will be paid, or there's going to be some serious trouble with our bodies being harmed. Basically, we'd get killed.
Oh my God.
And then through an email, basically saying, if you guys even think about playing or coming back to Europe without paying us, then yeah. We kind of got forced into retirement right there, and we'd been on the road, I think, for 10 years, or 10 months. And it was just about like Christmas time. We came home, we had no money. And we're also like, in debt to these sort of nefarious characters. And
Jesus.
it was just, I think we were so tired and so frustrated from all the work we put in, and we just all just walked away. And we're like, okay, maybe it's time to call this quits.
Oh,
we can't
man.
win. We can't win, and how are we going to pay this back? So that was sort of it for a while. Yeah.
How did that whole thing play out with the mob?
I mean, we weren't playing shows, and we were in America, so there wasn't really anything to do to us. We were kind of broken up. It kind of broke us up, and they definitely still made it clear, like, we expect to get paid. And I said, listen, we're going to pay you, but I don't know what to tell you right now. The band that kind of killed us,
Yeah.
But I told him, we will figure it out at some point. So a couple of years later, I was kind of getting the bug again, and I talked to Jeremy, and I said, I've been writing. Maybe we could, record another record and try and get this train back on the tracks and solve that shit in Europe. And he was like, all right, let's do it. So that's when we recorded Speakeasy.
And what year was that?
I think that came out in 2012, I want to say.
Yeah, on Discogs it says 2010.
Oh, maybe it was 2010.
Yeah, it says Sinking Ship was 2007. I mean, who knows if Discogs is right, but it's like Sinking Ship was 2007, and then 2010 the Speakeasy, and then
That's quite possible.
2015 is when the battery dies.
Oh, that was a re-release of our first thing. Yeah, that was just a re-release on vinyl.
You took time off, and then you go back together again, and then Fat puts it back out. Like, what was the relationship like with Fat when you guys were like, hey, we don't want to get, fucked up by the mob, so we're going to take a hiatus for a second?
They understood that was a really shitty situation. And, there was talk about, this guy who was in charge of this tour that really screwed us over. There was talk about, do we sue them? Because we did have contracts and all this stuff, and Fat was like, the thing is, if you do that, you're going to have to go to Europe. You can go to court, and you're probably not going to win. And so it just was this kind of, because we were thinking maybe we might have to sue them to pay off this other company so they don't kill us. But that didn't seem very feasible. So I think Fat knew we were just in a really tough spot and probably figured we needed a little break. So yeah, we took the break, and I think they're definitely happy when we got it back together and sent them all the new demos and stuff. They were really stoked that we were doing another record.
Didn't they have like a reorg happen with the label? It was at some point, I think I read something or listened to something where Fat Records had to lay off a lot of people just because the music industry became so hard to make money.
For sure, yeah. I think shit. I mean, when we got signed, there was maybe, I wouldn't say 20 people at least in the office, and I think it went down to maybe 6.
Yeah, that was it. Like, did you know Toby? Toby Jack?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
just know his name because of Brendan. Because I met him one time in California. That's when Lawrence Arms had just gotten signed to Fat, and then he went off and did Red Scare. So I was wondering if that was like the time where all the employees like had to leave or they got fired. They're like, well, we got to do something else now.
I think Toby was leaving to do Red Scare. I think that was a little different, but I think as far as like, when we first got signed, there was somebody that worked there just getting sponsors for bands, free skate shoes and guitar strings, and like there was people in charge of things that got cut that that if they weren't completely necessary, then they were sort of like let go. They basically said, how many people is it going to take to run this? And I know that was a really difficult time for them because they were really tight over there. But it was like, we got to stay with the times or get left behind, I guess.
So Casey, when he was telling me about you, he's like, yo, you got to interview Joe. He's got these crazy stories. So I texted him. I was like, I was like, you obviously know more than me, but there's something, because you're like, Joe has all these crazy stories, and feel free to not tell them. I don't know how like crazy they are or like where your comfort level's in, but it's just like I'm just gonna ask. But he goes, ask him about the touring with Against Me, because like there was a lot of fun, like nutty shit that happened on that. Is there anything from there that you're like, I could tell this?
It's not that there's nothing I'm like, I can't tell. It's a lot of it's such a blur. It's like these stories pop into my head all the time, and I'm like, oh God, that was so funny. But then when I try to think back to that time, oh God, with Against Me, we spent so much time with them.
Something about like spooning a homeless person in the van or something?
Oh no, that's Gwamper.
Oh, yeah, he said something about Gwamper.
Gwamper's got amazing stories. Gwamper was the bass player for well, he is the bass player for Avail. When they stopped playing for a while there, Gwamper was living with us. And so he joined the band playing bass.
Well, he joined after you guys got back together, right?
Yes, he joined for the last record. So yeah, so Gwamper's one of those guys. If you know him, there's nobody like Gwamper in the world. Nobody. And I think the story he's referring to, that was not with us. That was with Avail, where there was always these Gwamper stories with Avail, and that one in particular, I think they went to the van and Gwamper was sleeping in the van spooning a homeless guy, and they woke him up and he didn't even know how the guy got in there. He was just spooning with him. But with us, I can tell you a good Gwamper story. Chris from Hot Water Music, he used to stay with me at my house in Richmond when he was coming through, and the first thing he would always do is like smoke a joint and be like, tell me a Gwamper story, because he was in the band, and Chris was like, I need my fix, I need my Gwamper story. So his Chris from Hot Water's favorite Gwamper story was, we were touring in Japan. If you know Gwamper, he's kind of like Shrek. He's this really big guy. He's got huge hands, and he can come off as kind of a little clumsy sometimes, or he's just really high. And so him in Japan was crazy because you could hear him from like 2 blocks away. He was so loud, and it's crazy because when you're in these huge cities, it's silent, like millions of people, and it's silent. So he was just like, I mean, he was hitting his head on the doorways and crashing. He was like literally a bull in a china shop in Japan. And they loved him. They called him Ganchan. They called him like Big Toy or something. So I had a rough time in Japan. I had like crazy insomnia, and I didn't sleep for like, I think 7 days, 6 or 7 days.
Jeez.
And my brain stopped, and I ended up in the hospital. Long story short, because it's not about that, they gave me sleeping pills. We were leaving Japan to fly to Australia, and I just needed to get on this fucking plane and take these sleeping pills and go to bed because I was dying. We're on this plane. I've never seen a plane this big. I think it was like 25 seats across per row. It was just ginormous. And I didn't know they made planes this big. It was so big. And so as soon as they closed the door and they're like, all right, we're leaving, I took 3 of these sleeping pills and I went to the center row, and I was like, I'll see you guys in Australia. And I buckled in my ankles and my waist and my chest. So I sort of wake up to like hundreds of people screaming. And I'm like, knocked up on these sleeping pills. So I'm like got one eye open and I'm like everyone's just screaming and waving their hands, and the plane is like sort of like nosediving. And I think I'm dreaming. I don't think this is real. So I kind of like unbuckle the top one on my chest and I look over to Jeremy, our guitar player, because I know he hates flying. And I look over at him and he has his hoodie in his mouth and he just looks terrified. And I'm like, oh, okay, we're crashing. Cool. And I'm so out of it. And this thing is like nosediving. And I'm looking over, just staring at Jeremy, trying to like wake up and like figure out what's going on. And he's staring at the seat in front of me and he's shaking his head and he looks so pissed off. And I think to myself, like, what is he doing? And I remember Gwamper is sitting in front of me. And I'm like, oh no, what's Gwamper doing? So I unbuckle the second belt around my waist and I sort of peek over the seat in front of me and I just see Gwamper's huge hand, like a fist, and his fist is just like pumping. And I'm like, what is he doing? And by this point, I'm kind of waking up and everybody's freaking out, like screaming, top of their lungs. I look over the seat and Gwamper has his headphones on and he's just air guitaring and headbanging like as hard as he can. And I'm like, oh God, dude, what are you doing? And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be a lot happier if I die when I'm asleep. So I lay back down and I buckled back up and I just turned over and just fell asleep. I wake up and we're on the ground. We're in Australia. I'm looking around sort of like, did that really happen? And everyone is just white and nobody's like saying a word and everyone looks like shit. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that really happened. Nobody's talking. They're just getting their stuff and like getting off the plane. I don't say anything. And we walk through like customs in Australia. And I was the second one through. I like finished customs. I walked outside the airport to have a cigarette. And Jeremy, our guitar player, is standing there and he's smoking a cigarette and he's just shaking from head to toe. His hands are shaking and he's smoking a cigarette. And I'm just like, you okay? And he's like, no, I'm not okay. And I was like, okay. I don't say anything. And he just, all of a sudden, he just blurts out, he's like, why the fuck was that motherfucker air guitaring? The fucking plane is crashing. Why is he air guitaring? It's freaking out. And of course, like just then, in like normal Gwamper fashion, Gwamper walks out with his like rolling suitcase and he's like, what's up, ladies? like the worst thing he could have said at that moment. And Jeremy just jumped on him. And everyone kind of like settled down. Nobody talked. So we end up going to this place in Melbourne and we've got like 2 days to like rest before the Australian tour starts. It's not there anymore, but it's this amazing sort of like hostel venue bar. And there's even like a bar on the roof called the James Bowman Bar from Against Me because they used to play there all the time. So everyone kind of does their own thing for like 2 days and doesn't talk and just is kind of like decompressing from everything. So then the night of the first show that we have in Melbourne, everyone's sort of drinking on the roof and the crowd's getting there. And everyone's kind of like getting excited about being in Australia and being on tour again and stuff. And I have this conversation actually on camera somewhere where Jeremy has finally like gotten over it. And he's like, Gwamper, why the fuck were you air guitaring while the plane was crashing? And Gwamper is like very, like, if you talk to him, he's a really smart guy, incredibly smart, but everything's about Zen, and and deeper thinking and all. He smokes a lot of weed.
Okay.
So Gwamper starts to explain to Jeremy how the reason that the plane is crashing is obviously his fault because maybe he's done some bad things in life and he deserves it. And it's up to him to save the plane and save all these people, obviously. So he says, all right, I've got to trick this. I've got to like flip this, so I need to listen to like the most satanic music that I have on my iPod to cheat death. So he gets into Slayer and he's like, Seasons of the Abyss. No. South of Heaven. So he puts on South of Heaven as loud as he can. And he just starts air guitaring to it as hard as he can to save the plane. And he said, I saved the plane, didn't I? And truly believes to this day that he saved the plane by air guitaring to Slayer.
What was the reason the plane was literally skydiving, like nosediving?
Apparently, there's this spot between Australia and Japan that's like just a wormhole or something that's really bad as far as like where planes just drop 1,000 feet, and that's what we were going through.
That's just a normal thing. Like they're like, everyone just kind of buckle up right now. We're gonna go through some shit.
Apparently, I mean that's the only explanation I had is that there's this rough patch in between. And I guess if you're in a plane that big, it doesn't feel so hot when you drop a couple 1,000 feet or something.
Oh my God, I would have lost my shit.
Well, the thing is, Jeremy said to me, he said, I'm never getting on another plane again, ever. And I'm thinking to myself, we have 14 more flights on this tour. I didn't say that, but I was like, we have 14 more flights before we get home.
So obviously he had to.
Yeah, had to.
Oh my God, that is a nightmare and hilarious that this fucking guy is just playing Slayer as the plane's going down. Oh my God. So, it's like I don't even know how to transition out of that. So all right, so I'm gonna start wrapping it up. But so basically, like you guys got back together in 2010, did a third record with Fat, and but up until today, you guys are still playing. Is it more? I mean, I don't know. How often do you guys play per year, sans a pandemic?
We don't really, to be honest. What happened was we put out that record. We did some shows in the U.S. With Lawrence Arms and with Teenage Bottle Rocket, and then we went overseas again to pay these guys. And I wrote them and I said, listen, we're doing this. We're coming over to Europe again. And I said, don't kill us. We'll pay you. Like, send somebody to the last show, and you'll get your money. But just don't do anything to us until then. And they said, okay, we'll send somebody to the last show. And they sent someone to the last show, and I handed that guy a large stack of cash, and he made a phone call, and he said, okay, you guys are good. So we thought we were kind of done with that. And then we got back to the States, and we had a lot of stuff planned, and then our drummer sort of joined another band that was kind of more popular. And I think that's when Jeremy and I were just like, we can't really handle this anymore, because we had just kind of got this thing back up and running. So after that, I pretty much moved to Germany in 2014. 2013 was that last tour. In 2014, I moved to Germany.
Just for, was there like an opportunity there with a job, or you're just like, you know what, I just always want to go to Germany?
I just fell in love with it over here, and I felt that I was a lot happier in Europe from touring and stuff. And then I met someone on the last tour, and I ended up staying for like 2 weeks. When everyone flew home, I stayed and visited her. And then I was like, you know what, I'm going to move to Germany in a year. Went home and just worked a lot, sold everything, and then like 10 months later, I moved to Germany.
You had said at the beginning of the interview that, was it Jeremy was dating someone from Fat?
Yes.
Okay, and then you said they broke up. It probably didn't help you guys. Like, how does that mix? I have to ask this just because that was said in the beginning, and I feel like it's a good kind of bookend to that story. So they just dated and broke up, and then was she still part of the six that were there?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, they were together for I think 6 or 7 years, and so I think it was a very difficult. I think it was a very difficult breakup, and so I think, I'm not saying that has anything to do with us and Fat per se, but because we really were having our own problems, but it made things a bit awkward. I wouldn't say it helped us.
So like when you guys, because currently you're putting out a record on Iodine. It says May 27th of this year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how does that come full circle where you go from that not happening to now going through Fat? It seems like it wouldn't be the relationship there with Fat. I don't know if like relationship's the best way to say it, but the ability to put out another record on Fat seems like that wouldn't be on the table.
Well, I mean, the thing is,
since you're not touring or anything.
Yeah, that's what it is. I mean, Toby from Red Scare wanted this record. He wanted the B-sides, and he wanted to put all this stuff out. And Fat Records actually said no, which they don't do very often. But Fat Mike said, I want all of their... He said, I want to put everything out by them. Me and Mike had a really good relationship, and he wanted that record. But he said, that's further down the line when you guys have another release or two out before you start putting out B-side records and stuff. So that kind of came off the table. And then I think after the Speakeasy record, I had talked to the people at Fat about doing this B-sides record. This is before I'd heard from Casey again. They were just sort of like, yeah, I mean, we can't really put out bands records anymore that aren't active. It's just too tough these days. Like, we need bands out supporting their records. And I said, I totally understand that. Yeah, without Casey kind of coming back and into the picture, I think these songs probably would have just sat there for a long time.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, Casey's on this whole like quest with not quest, but yeah, he's doing all sorts of shit with this label that's been debunked for so long.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
I know, he's putting out like so much stuff for just coming back into the scene as he is. So like what's the whole plan with what do you do nowadays when you put a record out that's, I mean, this is like a rarities B-sides thing, so it's not, I don't know, like what do you do behind that?
A podcast, I guess. This is a new thing for me.
This is the new tour.
This wasn't a thing before. I actually have to tell you, like today, I was kind of like, why do I feel like a bit anxious about this? Because I've never done a podcast really, and I was like, this is different. I've never done this before. And the thing is, like, I actually listen to podcasts a lot now, like when I'm cooking in the kitchen and stuff like that. So I was thinking like, oh, it has to be really good, because I listen to them a lot. So I think today I was like, oh, well, this will be fun, but it's different. So yeah, I got some more podcasts to do and some press and things like that. And I think, when things kind of settle down, I really haven't planned anything in 2 years because nothing's happened. And I've watched tour after tour get canceled for bands. And I just got to a point where I was like, I'm not going to plan anything until it's, until I think something's actually going to happen. So I think it is calming down.
I saw that you guys played on your Facebook page. It said you guys played Fest 14. If you had something come up
Yes.
where it was something like that, like a fest or I mean, I don't know how big of a festival you guys could get on, because based on how popular you are and like how many people are surrounded, like I don't know what that looks like. Like, what would be a festival that you'd want to play that you're like, I think we could get on that?
A fest for sure. Yeah, that was always the homecoming kind of thing, even though we weren't from there. There was actually talk about us doing a bunch of shows at like the Middle East right before pandemic started.
Oh wow.
We had talked about me flying back and us doing maybe like 3 or 4 shows there or something, and playing like a lot of the old stuff and things like that. But we haven't talked about anything in a really long time.
Would Gwamper still be playing bass?
I have no idea who would be in the room, to be honest. I have no idea. Yeah. I mean, he's with Avail right now, so I would say probably not. I have no idea.
They're kind of doing a handful of things here and there. Like they did the 3 days. It was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But it was weird though. It was Carborough, North Carolina, and then Atlanta, and then Florida. Well, Florida made sense because of Hot Water Music, because they were tour with them. And that was it. And then they're like, yeah. I mean, I was like, in Cat's Cradle, I was like, how would they make money off that? But
I can tell you why. That's because that's the place we used to play, and they love that place. So I think it's more like nostalgia than like, let's play some huge place. Like, they want to play the clubs they used to play, if they're still around.
It was so fucking cool, man. I mean, just to see. I mean, the only thing that bummed me out was that Hot Water, they're touring. They have a 5th member who takes over for Chris, but I think if Chris is around, he still plays with them if Chris joins them live.
Chris Criswell, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it's different. I mean, I don't know. I saw Hot Water for the first time I went to Fest this year, and they played like the big outdoor stage. Did they have that when you played there in 14?
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
So they played that, and obviously the crowd was a little bit thinner because people are just getting used to going to concerts and getting vaccinated and all that shit. But it was just so different because he's a different voice, and the guy's really good at guitar and stuff like that. It's the experience. I was just like, oh man, I want to see Hot Water. Like, I want to fucking see Hot Water. Like,
yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Original Chris from Hot Water is a tough guy to replace. Chris Cresswell does a pretty good job, but Chris Waller does something else, man.
Yeah, dude, he's just like this big motherfucker that it feels like you'd see him just like fishing, like when he's not playing.
That's Chuck. Chuck's the fisherman.
Yeah, but like they have like that Florida grittiness. Those two guys.
For sure, yeah.
but Chris just like that tall motherfucker is that deep voice. It's really hard to replace that. But
Yeah, for sure.
well, cool, man. So all right, well, I'm gonna wrap us up, and let's see. Yeah, I usually asked if there's like a crazy story, but and like that you never told before, but I think you nailed it with the
Got
plane
your Japan story.
and like all that other stuff was happening. Well, cool, man. So, all right, two questions. One, what would you like to plug? It could be about you. It could be about a friend. It could be about both.
I mean, I guess the new Iodine record, the Beauty Fades record of B-sides and the Workers Union EP. It's all remixed and remastered and new artwork, and it sounds awesome. It's really great.
All right, cool. And yeah, so that's May 27th, 2022. So this should come out before that, I believe, because I'm about three or four interviews that are gonna come out before yours. So this will be like a month or so. But yeah, so
Cool.
May 27th. Hopefully, if this is past May 27th, then it's out. If it's before, it's coming up. And Casey's great. I love that guy. I just met him. I've said this before, I've never met him in person. We just met because of his interview. And we like text each other like all the time and shit now. It's so funny.
Yeah, it's cool. Me and him have become really good friends through this. It's interesting because he was always the contact with our drummer back in the day, and so it's kind of nice. Like him and I we have a lot in common. We got a kid the same age. We got boys, and it's been nice to become good friends with him through this. By the way, dude, we were really big fans of yours. By the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna put this in.
Yeah. I can't remember. I thought we played with you guys. Did we play with you guys up in Gloucester at the Art Space?
Holy shit.
Do you remember the Art Space?
We played there. Well, okay. So what happened was we were on tour with the Lawrence Arms. It was the last tour we did. That's when Fallon was in the band before he went off and did Gaslight and shit like that. And I remember we showed up to a VFW hall, and it was like, we can't play here. And there's this group of kids, and someone goes, let's go to the Art Space.
Yep.
And then we got there, and it was like 3 flights of stairs.
Yep. We
Yeah.
did that show with you guys.
Holy shit, dude! I had photos from that. That was us in Lawrence Arms, right?
Yeah, I have. I think I have the flyer somewhere.
I have photos because that was the last show we played with them before that. That was like we ended the tour there, and they drove to Chicago. They took Julia, who was our roadie, and then we drove to Jersey. And yeah, I have photos from that because we had this song. Because I took over lead vocals because Chris, our old guitar player, our lead singer guitar player, he quit, so I took that on. And there's a song called Winnie Cooper, so I always try to get the crowd to say like yeah, and every time I would always say that during the song. So Brandon comes up on the mic, he's like, all right, they're gonna play this song right now, and Mike has fucked it up for the last month and a half. So what he wants you to do is this. And I was like, oh yeah. That works way better. You're way better at this than that. The thing I learned from Lawrence Arms, you pick something up from touring, is they were like the grossest, dirtiest guys on the road. Neil definitely was a little bit less, but Brendan, I remember he's like, yeah, you just got to change your boxer shorts and your socks. That's all you need to do. Everything else, he's like the grime eventually stops smelling.
Yeah, it's a good theory, but
I was like, no, it doesn't, because they're greasy and disgusting.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
But that little venue, the Art Space, that was a huge turning point in our band, to be honest.
Really?
It's really big. That was the first time we ever played a show where the entire place just went nuts and was jumping around and going crazy. This is really like in the early days of the band. The first time that ever happened, and I remember we just looked at each other and we were just like, what's happening? But it was a big deal for us, yeah.
That's the best show where the crowd starts moving and you're like, don't do anything to fuck this up.
It had never happened before. And that kind of became our second home up in Gloucester for like the next year or two.
That place was
really kind of like...
Oh, sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say we really kind of cut our teeth up there. Like, it was a great place.
I felt like that place was such a fire hazard.
Oh, it absolutely was.
Holy shit. If that went up, I mean, that place would have been up in like minutes.
Yeah, just tons of arts and crafts and paints and like a three flights of stairs up one way with no escape. Yeah.
Yeah, and the entire place was just hardwood floor and like wood everywhere.
Yes.
How'd that place
I think, well, that place was run by, are you familiar with a movie called Chud?
I feel like someone's told me this story, but my brain is just not great these days.
It was this movie back in the 80s, and it was like, I think John Goodman was in it, and Daniel Stern from Home Alone. But it was like this movie about these mutants that live underground, and it was kind of a political movie or whatever. But it was written by this guy, Shep Abbott, and he was the one that started the art space and put his money from the movie into this place for kids to have music and art. But I think eventually the city sort of ran him out of there.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I did hear that story about that guy. Like not the running out of town, but just the open the space up. Yeah, it's hard to do any artsy shit, man. I mean, it's the idea is there and it helps creatives do that stuff, but it's a hard it's a hard business model.
Art is hard. Yep.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, last question, and I'll let you go. What scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
um, don't cancel a show. Um, always play as hard as you can, even if there's nobody there. And I think just if you, like from the beginning, if you write honestly, then it doesn't really matter what happens. Nobody can criticize you. That's about it.